Hello, and welcome to this week's Monday mini edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name's Scrimshaw. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Sorry for not having a full podcast last week. I recorded it Wednesday morning, and it didn't work for some reason. And when I went to do it by the end of the week, I was just, when I went to re-record it, I was just not, my voice was gone. And so I just decided to bail on the full episode last week. A full episode of the Scrimshaw Show will be available this Wednesday. Hopefully, ideally, as long as the technology failure doesn't happen again. But on this week's mini edition of the podcast, we're going to talk about the Senate and why I think people are overrating Republican odds with a healthy dose of why I got 2020 wrong, because I think some people are missing the lesson of 2020. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Follow the Scrimshaw Show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show. Read my writing at scrimshawunscripted.substack.com. And buy Salvation of the Storm. It's my pinned tweet on Twitter. It's a novel I wrote. I think it's good. I hope it's good. I would really like to think it's good, but who the hell knows? But yeah, no. On today's podcast, we're going to talk about the Senate. One of the things that a lot of people said, and I include myself in that because I was almost the vanguard of it, was that part of the reason Democrats had such a good chance to win the Senate in 2020 was the plethora of options for the 50th seat, right? Even if Democrats were only favored in 50 seats, as they were in the crystal ball's final projections, the chances Democrats could get to 50, they had a lot of 50th seats, right? Everyone knew that they were going to lose Alabama, so they were down to 46 notionally. And then from 46, you had Colorado. I was always 47. Arizona was always seat 48. And then Maine and North Carolina. Maine was 49. Well, look how that worked out. But according to all the public polling, Maine was 49. And then you had a situation where, okay, Democrats are Democrats were favored in North Carolina, but that wasn't a lock, and then they lost that. But the combination of Iowa, Montana, Kansas, Alaska, Georgia, the other Georgia, South Carolina, a lot of the reason a lot of the quant models were so optimistic on Democrats was, well, they'll get one of them. Right? And maybe not South Carolina, Alaska, Kansas, but they'll get one of North Carolina, Kansas, or North Carolina, Iowa, and Montana. Right? They get one of those. And I think had it been a Biden landslide, one or more of those probably would have gone. But the reason Democrats were so optimistic was in 2018, part of the reason the 538 model was always more optimistic on Republicans than in the Senate than you'd think is that even though they had Democrats winning Florida and Indiana, and I think it was toss-up favorites, but I think they were on the favorite side of the toss-up in Missouri. Democrats, the 538 model's sort of implicit thing was, yeah, we think Democrats are favored slightly in all these states, but they'll probably lose one of them, right? And then they ended up losing, 4 of them. But the sort of implicit belief, and get too, but the sort of implicit belief was that no, even one of the seats Democrats are favored in is going to go red. We don't necessarily know which one of them it is, but if the GOP have 30 to 40 to 45% chances in all of these blue seats, well, they'll probably get one of them. And that assumption was correct in 2018 when the GOP picked up North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, and Florida. Florida was really the only genuine surprise of that, and even Florida wasn't so much a genuine surprise if you were looking at the polls. It was a genuine surprise if you were just looking at the national environment. Although the 2020 results make that Florida performance seem less impressive. The thing about 2020 is that, and I don't say this to exclude myself from the narrative in any way. I wrote a piece arguing that Democrats were big Senate favorites in I want to say August of 2019, on the basis that they had so many outs for that 50th seat, right? They had 2 Georgias, Montana, Iowa, Alaska, North Carolina. I remember writing, maybe Alabama if Roy Moore won the primary, which he didn't. And from a Republican's perspective, thank fuck he didn't. But the problem for Republicans is that, like, a lot of the Senate optimism is, we'll get one of them. We'll get one of Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, right? And, like, I get the argument. I get it. Like, we'll get one of them. We need to flip one Senate seat to win the majority. And on some level, you're defending a state where Biden won by 0.2, a state where Biden won by 0.3, and a state where Biden won by 2. You just got to knock one of those off. I get it. And yet, I got to think Republicans are doing the same thing Democrats are doing, which is overrating how likely it is that they'll be able to flip one of these states. When, in reality, yes, you might have 35% chances in all of those states, but so did Democrats 2 years ago. And even if the polls weren't, like, even without the polling miss, Democrats weren't winning any of those. Democrats weren't close in South Carolina or close in Montana or close in Iowa. They weren't the national polls being 4 points wrong away from any one of those states. What happened was states reverted to their partisanship, but more importantly, because of the increasing correlation of results, the notion that, well, if Democrats get one, like, Democrats can pick off one of those, it's not really true anymore. And in the same way, it kind of feels like Republicans are either going to have 50 or 53 Senate seats at the end of this year. Like, you could maybe sell me on the argument that Raphael Warnock wins anyways, because, Herschel Walker's such a bad candidate. But it almost feels like if the GOP have a good enough night to beat these Democratic incumbents, if they beat one of them, they're probably beating all three. And the other sort of bad side for Republican Senate chances is you can go through the seat by seat, and, like, in none of these cases do I feel particularly strongly about Republican chances, right? It's going to be Herschel Walker versus Raphael Warnock. I just plainly don't think the Herschel Walker... Like, I get that Herschel Walker is a legend to Georgia Bulldog fans, and I get that the SEC and college football in the South means something more. Trust me, I'm a Florida Gators fan. I don't think a guy who was last relevant on the 1980 national championship team is going to do anything for the vast majority of Georgians who were either born after 1980 or, weren't born in Georgia. Walker's domestic violence history also, not super helpful, especially when you're trying to convince, Forsyth and Cherokee and Hall to continue to vote for Republicans at a rate, substantially more Republican than they voted for Donald Trump, or, honest to God, more likely than they're going to vote for Brian Kemp this year. Which, not great for the Republicans. Also, because people always do the thing, Raphael Warnock was a good candidate for Forsyth. Like, outran Ossoff there, outran Abrams by 8 points there. So Warnock actually is a strong candidate for the Atlanta exurbs, which goes against a lot of what people think about the Atlanta exurbs, but we can do that on another podcast. In Arizona, if it's Brnovich, I think the GOP are favorites. I think they're therefore Senate favorites. The problem is I don't think it's going to be Brnovich. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Blake Masters. Mostly just because if it's, like, Brnovich has said too many things that have justified Joe Biden's, like, general existence. And the thing about the Arizona GOP is that their voters are kind of crazy. And by kind of crazy, I mean they're completely insane. And I just don't really seem to have any belief that Brnovich is going to get this primary. And if it's Masters, I think Mark Kelly beats him because Kelly just outran Biden by 2. Kelly has shown an ability to win a tough race as a non-incumbent, let alone as an incumbent. And honest to God, as much as we make fun of her, Martha McSally probably is the best candidate the Arizona GOP have at this point. Because if your option is really Blake Masters and Carrie Lake, apologies if that's not her first name, for governor. If that's your likely ticket, then you don't know what you're doing. Which, I mean, the fact that the Arizona GOP have lost the presidency and 2 Senate seats in the span of 4 years really shows they don't know what they're doing. And then Nevada, I know some people are like increasingly, dooming, I guess not dooming about Nevada, but honest to God, I don't think Nevada is a near-term problem. I think it's probably a medium-term problem for Democrats, and I think the Hispanic swing is going to be a problem for us, but I don't really buy the idea that it's a problem this time. I think Catherine Cortez Masto is going to be a better candidate than Joe Biden for the state. I think running a heavily Hispanic state when Democrats are sucking with Hispanics means they will probably... Like, if you assume that Cortez Masto is going to do better with Hispanics than Joe Biden, then you can, kind of sort of make the argument that the notional margin that we're defending isn't the 2% that Biden won by, but it's the, it's closer to 4% or whatever. If you assume that, a Hispanic candidate who is, from Nevada and will focus on Nevada will do a lot better than a white presidential candidate who barely visited the state. And frankly, Adam Laxalt's not that good of a candidate. John Ralston has pretty ruthlessly mocked the idea of a Laxalt candidacy on Twitter before, and frankly, I'm just going to trust John Ralston knows what he's talking about when he mocks Laxalt. So yeah, in theory, and then New Hampshire, the GOP have no one. Sununu not running has got a bit of death knell for their chances there. The thing for me, and again, I was at Toss-Up last year, or last cycle, I should say. It's not last year. It's already December 2022 somehow. But, I understand how the math works. I understand that if you have a bunch of 35% chances, your expected value calculation suggests that, we'll get one of them, right? I understand how the math works. And I also understand that if you're just building a model, a projection, a forecast, your expected value is probably 51 Republican senators right now. Even if you think that every Democratic senator up for re-election this year is a slight favorite or bigger, yeah, you still probably in an expected value calculation have 51 Republican senators at the end of the day. The problem with that is, that's not how this works. The GOP are either going to... If the GOP manage to have a good enough year that they tip over one of Kelly, Cortez Masto, or Warnock, they're probably beating all three. And at the end of the day, I just find it extremely hard to believe, even as bad as Joe Biden is trending, even as bad of a week as his presidency and his popularity just took, I truly find it hard to believe that the GOP are going to have a good enough night to tip over 3 Senate seats when the candidates they are running are Adam Laxalt, Blake Masters, and Herschel Walker. Maybe Joe Biden's popularity is bad enough, but the thing is that federal partisanship is one hell of a drug, and in the same way that it realistically stopped Democrats from having any real or fundamental chance of winning in Kansas last year. And I mean, I could say it stopped them having a chance in Kentucky, but let's be honest, the sort of Democratic fascination with beating Mitch McConnell was always absurd as nonsense. Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia, and I'm not denying that, and I'm not pretending that that's not what happened, but if that race had been for some form of federal office, he would not have won. And it's likely that Joe Biden's drag on his party will not be large enough, at least with the information we have right now, to suggest that he is going to cause the Democratic Party to lose 3 Senate seats. And I kind of think they're either going to lose 0 or lose 3. That's it for this. That's it for the Monday Mini of the Scrimshaw Show. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Follow the show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show.